So welcome to this session on developing Microsoft Office business solutions that span the PC, Windows Phone, and the browser or the web. I'm Donovan Follett, and I'm a technical evangelist, and I work in the Developer and Platform Evangelism Organization in Redmond, Washington. And I focus on Office evangelism. So today what I want us to do is, first of all, to simply step back from the way we think about traditional Office solutions that we've developed. And I want us to think about the fact that it's really a wide open greenfield opportunity for the ways that we develop new Office solutions. And so with that, I'd like to think about the fact that we have, with SharePoint 2010, we have some new capabilities under Excel services. We certainly have the REST API now. We have the JavaScript object model. We have web services, which we had in MOS 2007, but there's some new extensibility points in the web services API that we're going to talk about. So having the services side of SharePoint available to us for Office development, not just with Excel services, but also with Word automation services. So within our Office solutions, we can call into SharePoint, and we can push out a job that's going to convert a document or build a document dynamically on the fly and convert that to a PDF and then have a workflow pick that up and email it out. I mean, all of those types of things are available to us now with the Office services that are available to us on SharePoint 2010. So we're going to think about those. We're going to see some of those in action today. But not only do we have the SharePoint side of things and the services side of things on SharePoint available to us, we also have the Azure services. So now we can bring in Azure where it's appropriate to be able to add reach to our solution, our Office solution. So we'll look at that a little bit today. And then we also have this great new form factor, Windows Phone 7, to be able to land our Office solutions on. So how can we now bring that form factor into our Office solutions so that we can now just simply access an Excel model that's back under Excel services, access that on the phone, push data into the Excel services, and get a response back and have that display on the phone. So all of that is available to us now. So we need to just think about this new green field of opportunity that we have. Now, of course, there's choices involved in that. You know, if we think about farmers, you know, as farmers survey their number of acreage every year or year over year, they have to think about how best to invest their limited resources to be able to get the maximum production. So that's what it's all about. That's how farmers have to think about the resources that they have that are limited, as well as the property that they have. And so they have to think about now which crop is going to be the best crop to plant this year. Is it corn? Is it wheat? Is it beans? Is it lentils? How can I best maximize my greenfield opportunities? And there are constraints around that, though. There's weather might be a constraint. You just can't plant some things in some locations. It might be government regulations that say, no, you have to set aside this amount of land every year. So there are constraints around farmers. It might be, though, that they need to also retool some of their investment, retool some of their equipment, and in order for them to be able to plant a new type of crop. But they have to think about how best they can maximize their limited resource for the best production. Now, what are they going to choose? Well, it's still, the bottom line is it's entirely up to them. They want a maximum benefit. So what does farming have to do with technology? Well, it has a lot to do with technology if you've around the farmers that I know. But the bottom line is that in our green field of opportunities for Office solutions, we also have to make those choices. We also can look at the broad opportunities in front of us, all the technologies that are available to us, and we can think about within the constraints that we have, maybe an organization has certain constraints that says, no, you can't use that technology. We just aren't going to go there. Well, that's a constraint. We have to deal with that. But we also, as technologists, architects, and developers, need to think about what is the best strategy and the best plan for moving forward, knowing our constraints, knowing our limited resources, but how can we best invest currently in these technologies in an evolutionary kind of way, not revolutionary, but in an evolutionary kind of way that is going to be able to push us into the future with the best productivity gains. Because that's what we want. That's why we write software. It's about productivity. It's about making people's life better when they touch our piece of software. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way it always was for me. You know, over my career, as I, designed and wrote software, the very best thing for me at the end of the day, when that software was out in the hands of the users, was that the users would say, "This is the greatest thing." That's what's exciting about software development. That's where we want to be. We want people to be productive. We want to let the machine do that redundant kind of stuff over and over again, and let people do people things. Let people do the kinds of things that require personality and interaction and thought. So when software can carry that kind of load that takes those repetitive tasks away from people and lets them be more productive and do people things, that's really where we want to be. So it's all about productivity. It's all about thinking about what the opportunities are, considering the constraints, considering our resources, and then putting that best solution into action. So that's where we are today. And the beauty is we have a green field of great opportunities in office development ahead of us. And it's absolutely up to us how we are going to move forward in that process. So, all right, that's my intro. Are you ready? Yeah, all right. Okay, so today the session objectives. We're simply going to take a traditional Office solution today, an Excel solution. We're going to move that solution forward, tapping into the new capabilities that we have under Excel services with the JavaScript object model, like I mentioned, with REST, with the Web Services API, and we're going to take that traditional Excel solution that's encapsulated in a document, and now we're going to expose that out to the web and use some of these new technologies to be able to give greater reach to that. And then once we have that new solution under Excel services, then we're going to start thinking about, well, gosh, that means that we can treat Excel as a service. We can submit something into an Excel application and have it hand back this value. I can use that on the phone. Well, maybe I can bring Azure into this so I can have easier connectivity back into my enterprise. So we're going to go there today. So by the end of today, we're going to have an end-to-end Office solution that spans the PC, the Windows Phone 7, and the browser. All right. So, just the landscape. What do we have to work with as technology farmers here? What do we have to work with as architects and developers? Well, we have, from Microsoft's perspective, we want to make sure that you have the best productivity experience available to you across these platforms. So whether it's the Mac or whether it's the PC, that is an experience around Office that millions of employees have and millions of customers and consumers have around the world. Office 2010 is the fastest adopted Office productivity suite ever in the history of Microsoft. Now that's pretty cool. So we have the Office suite available to us to use. On the phone, with Windows Phone 7, we can pop open documents, we can edit documents, read documents, and have tight integration, nice integration with the Office Hub on Windows Phone 7. And even with Mango coming forward, the next version of the OS for Office Phone 7 or for Windows Phone 7, we have an even easier way to connect up to Office 365 in the cloud where our documents may be stored out there. And then on other devices, you can have your contacts, you can have your email, you can have your calendaring, all of that available on other devices as well. And then on the browser, we have the Office web apps that can be viewed, can be edited on all the major popular browsers that we support. The Office web apps can land there. So this productivity experience is broad. It's across devices, it's across browsers, and it's across both the Mac and PC. But it's not just about being on those devices. It's also about Microsoft's commitment for information work productivity to be on your terms. Productivity everywhere. So, and it's on your terms, which means whether that's a 100,000-seat enterprise organization or it's a 10-seat startup or a mom-and-pop organization, we want productivity, these great tools to be available to workers everywhere. And so that's familiar, that's flexible, the Office suite. It's on-premise, it's in the cloud with Office 365. It might be a hybrid scenario where some people are on premises and some people are in the cloud using Office 365. But with the Office 365 suite, the Office Professional Plus, what is that? That's a subscription version of all the Office products. Office is Office is Office, okay? So it is the Office clients, but now it's not go buy the retail version, or it's not an enterprise EA, it's a per subscription use of the Office products, downloaded to the user's laptop or PC, and totally consumable just like it would have been purchased any other way. There's Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Lync Online. All of these come together and again give us that greenfield opportunity of places to now land our Office solutions. Okay, so let's get practical now. Let's start to work on this moving of a Office solution, traditional Office solution, forward to take advantage of these new technologies and bring some of this greenfield vision to light. So let's think about this. All right. So we have an Excel document. And, you know, Excel documents are great in the sense that many times they're just pretty straightforward, easy to use. Someone sits down and creates an Excel document that does a great thing for them. Now, in this case, we have an Excel document that's a TCO, total cost of ownership calculator. Now, what's that got to do with anything? Well, in this case, our scenario is that we're sticking with the farm theme, okay? In this scenario, we have an implement company or a sales company called Contoso, and they sell very expensive pieces of machinery to farmers. And in fact, the machine that they sell to farmers is more expensive than other machines that can be purchased by farmers. Now, that means that their sales staff have a little bit more difficulty in convincing the farmer to go with this more expensive piece of equipment than to go with one of the less expensive ones. So how are they going to do that? Well, they have to make that sale based upon the fact that their more expensive machine over time has a better total cost of ownership than the other pieces of equipment they could buy. So in this case, a finance person sat down and built out a document that could help salespeople out in the field sit down with their laptops in front of a farmer at their kitchen table and say, let's just go through this and look at this stuff. So here we have a total cost of ownership model. Now, they don't have SharePoint 2010. They didn't have SharePoint 2010 at the time this financial model was built. So what do? Well, they email it, and they email it, and they email it, and they email it. Well, that's okay, but Now everybody has this total cost of ownership model, and it's just being emailed around and emailed around. Some people may be making changes to it. Some people might be tweaking it for their own, for their own use in different ways. But the bottom line is this Excel document contains this solution, and the sales staff can use it. Now, Contoso purchases SharePoint 2010. And they hear all the great things about SharePoint 2010. They hear the fact that Excel web apps are available to them, and they hear about the fact that they have the JavaScript object model and JSON and all those kinds of things, their JSON model and the REST APIs. And so they think, okay, let's think about how we can move this forward. So out of the box, what do they get? They can simply publish their document, their Excel document, up into a document library, and out of the box, they get the Excel web apps. So that document can be displayed in the Excel web apps. Now that document is pretty rich. It has some VBA in it. It has some controls on it. So that might cause a problem with full display and use in the Excel web apps. We have to think about that. We have to work with that. But irrespective of that, maybe it can't be fully displayed and used in the Excel web app because it's out in Excel services, out under Excel services in the document library. They can just simply click on the link, open the document in the Excel rich client, boom. Everything's good, everything's happy, everything works just fine. But now they have these other capabilities available to them. They also have the web services still in 2010 with some additional capabilities. We'll look at that. And they have REST APIs, and they have the JavaScript object model. So now they have a new way to think about how they can expose that financial model out. How they can not just have that the solution be inside of an Excel document where they have to have it on the PC and using it, but how can they expose that financial model out now so that it can be interacted with just through the web on SharePoint? How can they expose it out? Now they have that opportunity. And once they expose it out and start taking advantage of that document as a service, as a component to a larger solution, now they can bring in some great new devices that can access that document and access the financial calculations and charts from that document simply by pushing data in and getting the result back. They can now land a nice solution on a Windows phone. So that's where the greenfield opportunities start to take place. So with that, let's look at the traditional and classic solution here. Interesting. Wrong laptop. I got your fish, Steve. Okay, greenfield opportunities. This is Western Washington, I should say Eastern Washington, over on what's called the Palouse region. If you want to think of greenfield opportunities, that's greenfield opportunities. But let's look at the Excel document here. So here we have our total cost of ownership model. And this is our model that was built by our finance department, someone in our finance department, again, to help salespeople make their case for selling a more expensive piece of equipment to a farmer because it has a greater cost of ownership over time, or a less cost of ownership over time. So we're just going to simply look at this spreadsheet just a little bit, this workbook a little bit. Here's the start page. We have tabs across the bottom in the sense for the different sheets. This is the machine inputs sheet. Here's the total cost of ownership result. And here's a more detailed cost of ownership result. And we have annual cost calculations. We have data that's being provided in the worksheet for what-if scenarios. And we have a parts summary. Now, what I want you to notice here is that this is a nicely formatted document for a salesperson to use sitting down with their customer. You know, this isn't geeky. You know, this doesn't show a lot of formulas and doesn't show the cells. I mean, this is really a nice user experience for the salesperson working alongside of their customer. And so that's the nice thing about this TCO calculator. It's a great interface. Now, what we can do is we can just simply come into this and we can provide, first of all, as the salesperson, information about this specific customer. In this case, we have the acres of corn. We can say, I'll tell you what, I think we're going to do 1,500 acres of corn this year, and that means we can bump up our soybeans to 1,075. Now, when I simply add those, put those two values in, it changes the chart on the side, so that's a nice little interaction there. But it also, the total cost of ownership will also take these values into consideration with respect to the machines. So there's some stuff going on behind here. This is a nice Excel model. Now, once the salesperson enters these values, then they can go over into the machine inputs. Now, here with the machine inputs, what they have is the comparison here of 3 different machines. And all the comparisons for the other 2 machines match up against this first machine here. This is the machine that, this is the company that Contoso sells for, the Woodgrove harvesters. So we can see that these are pretty expensive machines. And as I look at this, I go, oh, wow, we got a 36-foot header compared against a 40-foot header? No, farmer's never going to go with that. You have to have the same size header in comparison. So we're going to go ahead and pop down this little action here. So now we have VB popping up a form so that I can select the type of machine I want to compare against. And so let me just look here. That's the Northwind 36. So we'll check the N36 diesel. And now we've refreshed our document here so that now we have, now we're comparing apples and oranges here. We have all 36-foot headers that we're comparing on these machines. And so we look at this and we go, oh gosh, that's a $368,000 machine. This one's $318,000. At just the outset of the price, the farmer would go, I want that least expensive machine. However, when we look at this from the TCO results perspective, we can see that, from a total cost of ownership perspective, this one at that price is a little bit higher, but it's not a whole lot higher than each one of these other machines. It's 12 bucks higher. Well, I'll tell you what, as a salesperson, let's just come back here and I'll go ahead and, I'll give this guy a $20,000 discount. So we'll go $348,000. We'll just drop that 1,000. Whoops. Let's get this right here. So $348,000 and hit enter. And now I come over to my total cost of ownership, and now it's a more expensive machine, but over time, the lifetime of that machine, now I have the value lower. Now, the point of this whole thing is not to understand the model, okay? The point is to show that what we have is an office solution that is nicely user-friendly with respect to who's going to be using it, but we have an office solution that is completely contained within an Excel document. And I have to have Excel on my laptop when I use this. Now that's a good thing, but I don't want it to stay there. I don't want it to just simply land there. Let's go ahead and do one more thing. One thing I want to show you here is that as I click this drop down, can everybody see that okay, or do I need to as I click this drop down, you can see over here on the left-hand side that the developer of this workbook used what's called named ranges. Okay, so what's a named range in Excel? Any cell can be selected and have a name associated with it. Okay, or any selection of cells, any range of cells can be selected and have a name associated with it. So that in my formulas or in my VBA code, I don't have to refer to the exact cell values. I just refer to this named range value, which makes it really, really nice. Okay? because I can just refer to these. Now, what's interesting here about this is these named ranges then. For the named ranges, let's go ahead and click down. We can go to that named range. And we can go, okay, what's the named range for available machines? We click on the named range, and here we have the available machines. But if we click on, let's say, customer name, okay, it takes us directly to customer name. And so these named ranges are a way for us to refer to cells within the document, but these named ranges also become very important to us when we come under Excel services. So here we are. Contoso has these documents. They now have SharePoint 2010. Now they want to start taking advantage of Excel services under 2010. So we'll go ahead and close this. We've uploaded our document here, our Hansen document. We've uploaded it into under Excel services now on SharePoint. So we'll click on the document, and you can see that the document loads. We have our start page over here just as normal. We have our machine inputs. We don't have the availability in this to be able to do selections. We do get a TCO result, but everything that we're seeing here in this document at this point is as of the last time the document was saved. I don't have interaction capabilities with this document because Excel knows that there are parts of this document that the Excel web app cannot display. VBA doesn't run on the server, okay? And in some cases, if you've used comments or shapes or other objects inside of your document to make it rich for the Excel client, that some of those things cannot display under the Excel web app. So we go, well, okay, but this is where new opportunities come in. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close this out. And again, we could simply open this document in Excel. We open it in Excel. We have full, we can do anything we want, just like we could previously. Let's go ahead and think about now how to access this document using REST. Okay, the REST API is available to us. This document is under Excel services. So let me just go ahead and we'll click the model. Okay, so let's just look at this URL up here. Okay. Just take a look at this for a second. You'll see that it is intranet.contoso.com. Okay, so that's my SharePoint site. _VTI _bin / excelrest.aspx. That's the location for the REST API for Excel. Okay, so we have to have our URL conditioned with that as the first part, but then we give the library, okay, the document library, WHAC TCO. That's the total cost of ownership library where this document lives. Then we give the document name, Hansen.xlsm, okay, the document name, file name, and then we simply go /model. And what the Excel services does for us then is it looks into that document, it gets that document, looks into that document, and hands me back a model of that document. And the model encompasses the ranges, the charts, the tables, okay? So we'll just go ahead and take a quick look and drill down into this. So we'll go ahead and drill down into ranges. When we see ranges, there they are. Available machines, corn, acres, customer name. Everything, all the name ranges that we had inside the rich document, we have those name ranges out here. Well, what if I click on that named range? Oh, I don't display anything. But if I do a view source, here is an Excel document, an Atom document, that has all the name ranges handed back to me just via REST. I can get those. That means I can programmatically come after these things. Well, yeah, but that doesn't help me very much. I'd rather see that in HTML. So we put the format equals HTML, and now we can get the available machines back in HTML. So now we can easily read them and see them. So now we can start thinking about that Excel document as a service. I can pass in information, I can get stuff back. So let's go ahead and look at the charts. So in this case, I can come back to the charts, and the Excel model knows which charts are available in the document. I click on chart 3, and simply by enhancing that URL, saying after model, I say, give me the charts, but not all the charts. Give me specifically chart 3 and format that as an image. Now I can get that chart back. I could display that chart anywhere that this URL can be hit. I can display it in any device. I can display it in any application that this URL can be hit. Okay? But what if I wanted to dynamically pass in values and have that chart rebuilt for me and handed back? We can do that too. So we'll see that. All right. So let's go ahead and come back. How are we doing? So that's our classic solution. So programmability in depth. Now, as developers, what we can do is we can now, again, use the Web Service API to go against that document that's saved out there. Now, with Excel Services 2010, a couple additions were made to the API. One was that you can programmatically, through the web service, you can programmatically interact with a document that's already opened by other users, so your web service can be interacting collaboratively with what somebody else is already doing on that document. So that's pretty cool. The other thing that was a huge customer ask that the Excel Services team put into the Web Service API was the ability to not just manipulate the workbook and do stuff with it, but also to, once you do that, to persist those changes back. So now you can go ahead and save that workbook back through the Web Service API. We saw the REST API. It's simple ways to be able to access the live workbook. It's stateless, just like any web URL is stateless. And we have what's called the ECMA, and just think JavaScript object model. So that can now react to events that we can use, react to user interactions. It can retrieve information out of the document through the JavaScript object model, and we can push data into the document through the JavaScript object model. So from the browser perspective, we have the JavaScript object model that now can interact with the document. And REST, you can have REST, of course, to support browser types of applications you might be building. But you can also use other types of devices and rich client types of applications that can pull information out of the Excel document via REST. And then, of course, 100% on the server is the Web Service API. So migrating our solution now, we have this custom, or we have this solution that's inside of an Excel document. Now we want to start thinking about, okay, how do we make this document now a part of a larger solution? And so when we do that, we have to start thinking about the design. There were certain things in the Excel web app, in the Excel document, that aren't going to be available to us on the server. We don't have VBA available to us on the server, and VBA many times is used for the navigation, being able to nicely navigate through a document, pop up a form, things like that. So because we don't have VBA available to us on the server, we need to be able to do that navigation with the JavaScript object model now. But we are also interacting with the document from the outside in now. It's not all self-contained in the document. Now we can manipulate the document from the outside. So we can make that experience as rich as we want using the web-based technologies. We have to update the automation. Again, VBA might be doing some things for us, so we have to think about the automation capabilities within our document and how we might move those forward for this new services world that we're looking to open up, as well as componentized business logic. Think about ways, you think about the chart. That's a piece of business logic in there. In the document, we want to be able to hand values in and have that chart recalculated. So think about how you're going to expose, in a services kind of world, those different parts of the Excel document that you want to be exposed through the named ranges. Okay, so let's think about now how to start moving this document forward so that it is a part of a broader solution, a web-based solution. Here I have my SharePoint site, and on my SharePoint site I want to have a web-based solution for the TCO calculator. So I can use the Excel Web Access web part to expose the grid of the document out on this web page. So I'm going to put that over on the right-hand side. Now again, I have to be able to navigate that document, and I have to be able to push things into it and pull things out of it. So over on the left-hand side here, I'm going to have my HTML page, and I'm going to put my model navigation over on the left-hand side. So you can see my the links for each one of the sheets in the document. Well, I want to load that dynamically, so I'll build that out with JavaScript. And I want to be able to select machines because I don't have the VBA pop-up available to me. I want to be able to select machines. And I also want to bring the chart out onto my HTML document and place that in the upper left-hand corner as well. And I want to just be able to get that chart via REST. So I'm going to do this then using JavaScript. So let's take a look at the solution now as we start to move it forward. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll come back into my document here. We'll go to the TCO calculator. So what I've done up to this point is, this page will take a second to load. What I've done up to this point is I've simply gone in to all site actions, create a new page. I've chosen to create a web part page, and so I have a new web part page here in my SharePoint site. And I just named it TCO Calculator. So according to the way I did my design, over here on the right-hand side, I have my Excel Web Access web part. So if I put my page in design mode, let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for you all. Is that a little better? Okay, so I'll go ahead and put my page in design mode and edit the page. And here you can see it's just simply a web part page. And over here on the right-hand side, I simply went add a web part. I chose business data, and I chose an Excel Web Access web part. Okay? And I added that to the page. I'll cancel out of that. And then over here on the left-hand side, I've added a content editor web part, which I use for my JavaScript. So in this case, I have the Excel Web web part. I'll go ahead and stop editing. And as you can see, we have across the bottom, we have all the sheets available to us. But what's interesting is that within the Excel Web Access web part, I can go ahead and start to make some changes here. I can make this 1500, and you can see that the model updates. Okay, so in the web part, it doesn't consider the VBA and the forms controls, etc., as an issue. It just simply displays the document for us, and now we can interact with it. So I'll go ahead and put that back to 1800, not that that's important. But then over here on the left-hand side, I have my JavaScript object, my JavaScript code that I want to load in. So edit the web part. I'll go ahead and point to a valid JavaScript file here. Apply that. And click OK. All right. So now you can see that I have a document, a web page, that has a grid on it that I can interact with, and I have an HTML page on the left-hand side that has JavaScript that is going to function and work against the document. So rather than having to navigate through the sheets on the right-hand side, using the tabs, I can simply click on Start. Takes me to the Start page. I can go to my Machine Inputs page, my Results page. Again, every page is now exposed for me. How did I build out those links? We'll take a look at that in just a second. Also, I want to be able to choose machines. So over here, show machines, show my machine selection here. So now we can see I want to choose the N36 diesel. So I'll go ahead and change that. Let me go ahead and migrate to my machine input sheet so you can see the change. So I better show you that again because you might not believe me. So I'll go back to the N40. So here I'm using JavaScript to take a value. I load these selection lists from the sheet, okay, and from the data sheet, but now I go ahead and click on the selection, and again you can see that my model changes. So we'll go ahead and put that back to an N36. My model changes, and we can go to my TCO result, and you can see that we have the TCO result here. Now if we come back to the page, back to my machine inputs page, and again, now if I go ahead and change my value to 348,000, okay, and let's just go ahead and I'll go ahead and refresh my chart. And so let me go ahead and refresh my page. Okay, you can see that my chart is refreshed over here. My chart is refreshed over here. This chart is being loaded with REST. Okay, so again, although I do not have the Excel Rich client being exposed out under Excel Web App the way I would think, what now I've done is I've now taken my solution and I've built it out in a web, using the web technologies, using the JavaScript object model. Now the last thing that I can do here is, in this case, I could save a copy of this document, and in that sense I would simply call the Web Services API and pass in this document and have this document saved. So let's just go ahead and take a second here and look at some of the code behind on this. So we want to look at the JavaScript. Now that's really small there, but I just wanted to, I'll just show this to you. But the first part of the document is really just straight, HTML types of programming here. In this sense, I'll go ahead and now make this a little bit bigger. So I have a div tag for my chart image. This is where I'll refer to this div tag in my JavaScript to put the chart. Here's where I'm going to locate my hyperlink, so I'll refer to that in my JavaScript code. Here's my machine drop-down. Here's my save of my file, etc., etc. So these are just div tags marking locations within my HTML where my JavaScript is going to dynamically place my content. So now, how do we interact with that web part that's on the page? How do we push data into it and pull data out of it? Well, we do that, first of all, by building out this event handler right here, right up front, to be able to trap the page load event. So once that HTML page is loaded, then this event is going to fire. So in this case, we have the page load event that's going to fire. And the first thing that we do on the page load event then is we need to get a reference to that EWA control, okay, that Excel Web Access control. That's the top of the object model that we're going to be working against with JavaScript. So here we simply say, okay, as soon as you have that control, okay, as soon as you get the reference to that control, then give me this callback here called getEWA, and that's our function get Excel Web Access. Now, just for real quick reference here, if I simply come out here to Bing, for you JavaScript guys and ladies, Excel JavaScript, object model. There's a great blog post by the Excel team. Just type in Excel JavaScript object model. This will be your first hit. Go ahead and open that. I'll open that. And so here's the JavaScript. This talks about the object model, gives you some examples, talks you through exactly what I'm talking you through right now. And then there's this great little document right here that shows all the classes available to you in the that you can use in your JavaScript. Okay? So here we're getting this EWA control, and then we are going to look into the collection here and go ahead and grab the first web part on the page. So that's how you get there as a resource. So we're down here into the get EWA function now, and just simply step through it. The first thing we're going to do then is we're going to, now that we have the reference to the control, now we're going to say, okay, control, give me the first instance of the web part on the page. Okay, because you can have multiple Excel web parts on the page, so web access web parts on the page. So in this case, it's say, give me the first instance of that, and then once we have that instance, then we're going to put in an event handler here that for a selection on changed event. So what we're saying is anytime a selection in that document changes, I want to be notified of that. Okay, so we can use that. And then we have a function here called getChartImage, fill drop-down lists, and create hyperlinks. The create hyperlinks is what I simply want to show you here. And we need to get on to the other parts of the demo here. So what I want to do is just show you that once we have, okay, that Excel Web Access control available to us in JavaScript, then we simply refer to that. So here's my Excel web part, and all I say is get active workbooks, active workbook, get sheets. Okay? And I punch that into a variable here. So now I have a sheets variable that has all the sheets in it, and now I want to build out the hyperlinks. So I just grab that div tag for the hyperlinks, and then I iterate over my sheet count, and I do a get item, and I simply load up the hyperlink by accessing the sheet.getName. And so I iterate over that, and boom, 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 for every sheet I have a hyperlink. Okay? So this is pretty straightforward, just types of JavaScript programming. We have an object we're operating on, and we just have to know the methods and the properties that are available to us on that object to be able to build out our document. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let that sit. We'll move on to the Windows Phone 7 parts of things. So now we have our Excel document available to us with REST and the web service APIs. And so now we can think about, all right, so that we can think of that document as a service. So what if I have my Windows Phone, a new Windows Phone application that can access that document through a web service that I've exposed out in Azure that connects through the Azure the App Fabric service bus, so it manages all that navigating through my firewall, my corporate firewall, to be able to access a web service that I've now built on premises that has methods that can interact with Excel web services and get me information out of the document, or the client-side object model that can go against the Excel services, the SharePoint site, and can hand me back, by calling those methods, hand me back data to my phone so that now I can, as a salesperson, I can actually do this work on my phone when I'm on the golf course with the farmer in their off season. So what are my steps? Create an on-premises service, create a service and deploy it to Windows Azure. I have those two services talking to each other through the App Fabric service bus on Windows Azure to navigate my firewall hierarchy, my firewall scenarios. And then I can connect to my back-end services with any device that can talk out to my WCF service in Azure. So now we start looking at, all right, let's land this solution and think about my Office solution extending all the way to the Windows Phone now. So the first thing I need to do on the Windows Phone is I need to interrogate the document library. Steve, if you want to come on up, you just come on up. I can interrogate the document library on SharePoint to hand me back all of the models that are in that SharePoint list, because I want to be able to choose the one I want to interact with. So in this case, we use on the Windows Phone 7 for a design, we use the long list selector control. You can see it in the picture. And that tool is available to you in Silverlight, or that control is available to you in the Silverlight for Windows Phone Kit. There's some resources at the end. But how does this work? So the phone application is going to call the Get Models method on the Azure Forwarder service through Wi-Fi or 3G. The Forwarder service is going to call the Get Models through the App Fabric service bus, call that method back into my on-premise WCF service. And that's going to access SharePoint and return to me all of the models that are available. And that'll come back to my phone. Okay? Secondly, once I have the model, now I have to be able to get that document and have a session ID created for that document under Excel Services. And I'm going to get that document through the Web Services APIs. So from a design perspective, I use the pivot control on the phone. And again, you saw the types of pages that we go through. We have the information page, we have the combine selection page, we have the summary page. So those are the types of views I want to have out on my phone, and the pivot control is going to show those for us. So in this case, my phone application is going to call the Open Workbook method in my Azure service, which is going to forward that on to my on-premises service. It's going to open the document, get a session ID through the Web Service API. It's going to hand that back to the phone. And now every time the phone talks back to that web service to get another part, it's going to use that session ID as it passes on down. So with that, extending the phone to Windows Phone 7.
All right, thanks, Donovan.
This is Steve Hansen. Steve Hansen is a VSTO MVP, and he's going to talk through how he's built out this on the phone side.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, let's switch that over there. I'm going to have to go back and forth between the Wolf Vision and the phone, so put that down. All right, so I'm just going to reiterate on a few things before I really get into the phone piece. First of all, just the assets out on SharePoint. So when we're looking at the phone here, we know where we're going to go. First of all, I've got a TCO document library. And the SharePoint site we're looking at right now, I'm VPN'd into an actual SharePoint, my dev server back in Minneapolis. So, and we're going to look at the phone, and when the phone talks to this, it's going through, I've got a Wi-Fi backup. It's either going to go through Wi-Fi or 3G, through Azure, ultimately back to this SharePoint server. So on this SharePoint server, I've got a TCO document library. So this is the document library where you would store your customer models. Notice I've also got two other ones called TCO Prospect Letters and TCO Prospect PDF. Now this model was really inspired by a real-world TCO model. It wasn't in farming, it was in a different industry. And there were some challenges that this customer had about how they want to use their TCO model. Because behind the scenes there's tons and tons of calculations. There's hidden worksheets which aren't here. And we simplified it quite a bit. And so one of the things about Excel services that makes it real beautiful, especially not only can we access it from the phone, but this customer had a lot of proprietary information in the model, tons of calculations, and as a developer, the thought of trying to codify all of those calculations horrifies me. I would not want to take those and try and put them in some class library and try and redo this. So using Excel services, we can really have our finance guy create a model. We can lock it up, put it where it can't really be accessed except programmatically. And then we can have our devices hit that and use it as a programmable object. Now the reason I'm showing you these other libraries here, the prospect letters, is after you meet with the customer, they want to say, oh great, put those numbers in the document, or can you send that to me? Well, they didn't want to send out an Excel file containing all this proprietary information. We want to put it in a document or maybe a PDF that then gets emailed to the customer. So we're going to be hitting these document libraries as well. So Donovan did a great job of explaining the model. The original design objective was to, although there was all these calculations in there, to really make it easy for a salesperson to use. Limited Excel knowledge. We don't want them to worry about going in and muck around in a bunch of formulas and stuff. Just, they can enter in their data. First of all, customer, then they select the machine inputs, which all of the machine inputs had defaults associated with them, but they could tweak them if they wanted to. And then after they do that, then they just simply view the result. So the idea was this TCO result page used to be the thing that they would print out and they just give to their customer. So when we thought about how we're going to move this over to the phone, we really wanted to follow that same kind of workflow. We want to, first of all, you should be able to look at any of the documents you've created. So those are all the documents in our TCO document library. The second thing, though, when you bring up the model, it should follow that. You should go right to the customer information, enter that, then go right into the machine information, and finally end up on a simple one-page result of here's the TCO. So with that, let me switch over to the phone here. The other thing, so it's going to right now go out and get the models. So in that short amount of time, went all the way back to my dev server in Minneapolis, queried that TCO document library, figured out what models were there, brought them back to the phone. This went through the Azure service. From the Azure service, it goes through the service bus to another WCF service running on my SharePoint server. That handles the communication with SharePoint. Now, we also want to embrace the Windows Phone 7 design objectives. We want to use familiar controls there. So we've got the long list selector. Although we don't have a lot of models here, you should be able to, if we did have dozens and dozens, make it real easy for someone to get to the model that they want to get to. So let me go ahead and open up the model for Chris Sells. So what's going on right now is we've made a call into Excel services using all of those named ranges that you saw before, really just pulling all those out in just one call, bringing them all back to the phone. As you can see here, we're looking at the customer information for Chris. We've got a pivot control here to go through the different machines here. So I can see I've got Combine 1, obviously try and keep it a little centered here, Combine 2, Combine 3, and our summary. So far, this is cool because it is at least an easy way to view this information on a phone. So if you bump into Chris out at the grain elevator or something like that, you don't have to have your laptop or anything with you. You got your phone in your pocket, you can pull it up, you can view it in a very easy way, easy manner on the phone. Note that if you had the connection through the Office Hub and had downloaded this, you could also view it in Excel Mobile as well. What we wanted to do was really complement that because with Excel Mobile, it can be pretty small. Granted, you can enlarge that, but it's not quite as easy and simple when you've got a lot of information you want to display and you want to pick certain pieces. So that's what we want to do on the phone here. So this is all fine and dandy, but what we really want to do is when we bump into Chris and he says, hey man, yeah, I looked at that information. I noticed your price on Combine 1, you got the list price in there though. No one ever buys at the list price. Now come on, right? You're like, oh man, I can't believe we did that. Yeah, you're right. With today's incentives, you'd probably really pick that up for $325. So what we want to do is provide that calculation ability right on the phone. So we're going to watch the total cost of ownership here. I'm going to press refresh. And we're going to see our total cost of ownership after we change the price go from $197 or whatever it was to $144. So now we've got that ability to do this kind of what if or modeling wherever we're at, using all of that knowledge that's back in this Excel document back on our network. We can do this anywhere. We've got our phone anywhere we bump into Chris, and and do that. Now, we've got some other neat things in here, too, because a lot of times you want to do more than change the price. You might want to change, I don't know, some of the other features or customer information. And you may either want to save that as a new document. You may want to save your changes, or maybe you want to just reset it back to its current status. You can do all of that from right on the phone. So let's say I've made that save here. And this time I want to save it, except I'm going to save it as a new document. Just really because I want to demonstrate the feature. How about that? So I'm going to press Save As. I'm going to provide a new file name here. We'll call it just V2. And I'll press Save. And I got a little notification that it was saved successfully, but where was it saved? It was saved back to SharePoint. Which one am I here, Donnie? C. Nope.
Next.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my document library. And I see now I've got Chris Sells V2 in my document library. So immediately, as soon as I press Save, it's there. It's back in my own network where it needs to be. So let me also go back here and refresh my models. And you can see, oh, I'm sorry. Forgot you didn't see that. But now we do see Chris Sells V2 out there. So I'm going to open that one back up. And let me show you the final bit of functionality here. So I'm out there at the grain elevator, and Chris is happy with the price. He just wants this information. So he says, hey, can you send that to me? I say, sure can. So I press email. And I'm going to find Chris's information here in my contact list on my phone. There is Chris. Looks a lot like Donovan, which you probably can't see, but it did. And in just a second, I'm going to get a little notification here. I better.
What's it doing?
Whew. I was getting nervous there for a minute. Okay, so it says I just really got a notification. And here what's happening is when I do that, it is making a call eventually to my service on SharePoint. And we're using the OpenXML SDK on the server there to crack open Chris's file, the Excel file, crack open a Word template, and just inject the values that we want into our letter into that document. The other thing it does is some people want to send the PDFs rather than the Word documents. So we create a Word Automation Services job to convert that Word document after it's created to a PDF file. So let's switch back over to my SharePoint document library. In prospect letters, I've got a Chris Sells V2, which we can go ahead and take a quick look at that. Now, when this opens up, where you see these values in the table here, those were all just content controls within the Word document, which just made it a lot easier using the OpenXML SDK to inject those values into the correct places. So just content controls were the key there. Real easy to put those into a Word document. As far as the PDF goes, I'm going to go to the Prospect PDF. Oh, and look at that. It ran at 8:30. So the Word Services automation jobs, they run on timers. And so by default, it's every 15 minutes. And so I just lucked out that it happened to run at 8:30, and so it got converted for me. So I don't have to go in and force it to convert. Central time, right. 8:30 Central, Minneapolis time. So I'm going to go ahead and just save that. We'll open that up. You see we've got now a PDF document. The thing that is not I'm going to show here is ultimately the emailing because I don't have that hooked up. But what we would do would be to put a workflow on our PDF document library and do the emailing from there. The other thing, which you would potentially do, is bring the documents back into the phone, where you can also email it from the phone. There's a couple of different routes that you could go. So that's quick look at the actual phone application. Pretty sweet, huh? Huh? It's nice. Now, I'd love to tell you that I'm a Windows Phone 7 expert, but I'm not. And that's why this is also awesome, because you don't have to be an expert to do any of this stuff. So with that said, let's look at the phone application. Anyone in here done Silverlight? WPF? Right? Anyone code in C#? Yeah? This is going to look so familiar. If you've ever tried developing on other mobile platforms, this is familiar. It's easy to do. So what we really have a couple of pages on the phone. We've got this main page, and so when this comes up, you can see I've got a design surface on the far left showing what it looks like right now. In the middle, I've got my XAML, which defines all the controls. You can see I've got a panorama control. I've got a long list selector. And then if we look behind this page, just got a simple C# file. So this is Silverlight on the phone, so everything happens asynchronously. And really all I'm doing is making calls to WCF services I've created. So you can see right here I've got get models async. I've got a get models method in my WCF service. We're just making the calls back to that, getting the data back and binding it to controls that we've got on the phone. So there's not a whole lot going on in the phone project. It's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take much time to get productive in it at all. I've also got a model view. So this is where you've selected a model. Now we're going to show those results. We really tried to follow the Metro UI kind of guidelines. I mean, it's easy to read. It's kind of sparse. It's simple to do, too, code-wise. I've got a pivot item, and I've got just a few things defined. I've got a one grid for my customer information, one for machine 1, one for machine 2, one for machine 3, and one for the summary. And if we look at the code behind those, one thing you're always going to see a lot of anytime you're making calls into Excel services, web services, is the session ID. So that's really just your handle on the file. But same thing here. I've just created methods in my WCF services which really do the work in communicating with SharePoint. I've got get model async, a call that's out on WCF. So I'm going to switch back over into a different project that contains my WCF services. So this is actually a project that contains some of the WCF services I use. You'll notice one, I'm just going to go through the list of solutions here so you know what's in here. Oh, I don't have Zoom it going on my server. Okay. Well, anyway, I've got a shared class library. This really just defines the interface and a class library that's shared by my WCF services. I've got a TCO forwarder service web role. This is my WCF service out on Azure. So all this is really doing is just providing easy access and communication to an internal WCF service running on my SharePoint server. In fact, let's look at the code for the TCO forwarder service. I mentioned I had a method in there called getModels. If we look at the code in the forwarder service out on Azure, all it's really doing, it's just a teeny thin wrapper around my actual TCO service internally. So I'm going to look at that. I've got another file called TCO model here. This is in my actual TCO service that runs internally. Oops, wrong one there. Here's where I've actually got the meat of these methods. So this one, get models, this is where I've got to query that TCO document library and just get a list of the files in there. So in order to do that, one of the easy things to do is there's something called the SharePoint Client Object Model, which is just a really flexible way to work with SharePoint from devices or from computers or services not running on SharePoint itself. So all I'm doing is just going into that document library, getting a list of the documents. I'm going to return those back out to the phone. I've got another one here, and all of these are pretty easy. This one to open a workbook, just making a simple call into Excel services to open a workbook. All of these, you're going to find generous documentation on all these out there. They're pretty easy to use. Really, we just got to provide the path, which we know from our TCO document library, a required out status, and the main thing is we're going to store the session ID, because anytime we want to use this file or refer to this file in the future, we've got to have the session ID. So let me go way down to one of the biggest ones in here, just because we've got a lot of ranges to return back. But this method called getModel. So as soon as I navigate to a model on the phone, eventually this getModel method is called. And I've done this a few different ways while I was experimenting. One, I had a chatty kind of method where it would just get ranges as it needed them on the phone. So we'd make a lot of calls, your typical chatty type service. Didn't work real well, especially when I got into the asynchronous results on the phone. So then I went with just a one call, getModel, get everything at once. Originally I didn't do it that way. I was worried about all the I just thought over the cell network and stuff, I was worried about performance. Actually, it works pretty good. Comes back pretty quickly. So the only reason it's long here is just because it's retrieving a lot of ranges all at once, so we can do everything in one call. So there's a lot of other smaller things. We see TCO letter. All the other services are pretty small, just all using the Excel services web service. Once in a while, the SharePoint client object model. Once in a while, accessing some stuff using the REST API in Excel. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Donovan here.
Okay, great, Steve. Am I still on here? Great. I absolutely love it. So let's go ahead and wrap up here. So as you think about it, just recognize that the greenfield opportunities are out there. There's new ways to go ahead and leverage There's new ways to make sure that you go ahead and leverage your technologies, the new technologies that are available to you, the new form factors that you can land your Office solutions on, like Windows Phone 7. So think about those greenfield types of opportunities. It's really up to you in how you move your Office solutions forward. There's certainly other sessions around Office content that are available to you. And for resources here, you can go ahead and note my blog post. I'll be writing more about this. This whole TCO model piece here is going to be available, possibly not the phone piece, but as far as the TCO model piece itself, with as far as Excel services, the JavaScript and REST, we're going to make that available as a hands-on lab online on MSDN, so that'll be coming out. So just watch my blog post for that. And other resources at TechEd, please complete the evaluation. And we have just about 2 minutes here. If you have a question, if you just pop up to one of the microphones, Steve's here. He can help answer some of the questions on how they built this out. Other than that, thank you very much. We appreciate having you take this early session time this morning.